July 21st, and it is 10:17 a.m.
All right. Should we do roll call? So roll call, Chair Patton Howard,
Here.
Vice Chair Lisa Copeland. Clerk Show, she's not here, absent. Treasurer Darren Morton. Present. Member Brian Johnson.
Present.
Member Deborah Reynolds. Let the record show that she is not here, she's absent. Madam Chair, we don't have minutes for today. We'll definitely do it.
Thank you. So, we proceed with the agenda.
So I wanted to begin this morning, good morning, I wanted to begin with providing an update on what is happening with the CDBG and home program at the federal level as it relates to the appropriations. President Trump in his budget that he submitted to Congress zeroed out the CDBG and home program. The U.S. House of Representatives Transportation and Urban Development Appropriations Subcommittee released its appropriations bill last week, and they provide $3.5 billion for CDBG, an increase of $100 million from last year. The home program is funded at $1.7 billion, an increase of $350 million, and the measure also provides $3.4 billion from the homeless assistance grants, up from $2.7 billion in fiscal year 20. The measure also includes a separate supplemental infrastructure section in the bill, the appropriations of $75 billion. $70 billion for the public housing capital fund to address the backlog of physical repairs needed for public housing developments across the country. $5 billion for the National Historic Trust Fund to support the creation, rehabilitation, and preservation of affordable housing for low-income households. Funds would be prioritized for the homeless and for people at risk of homelessness, and $5 billion for the home program. The U.S. Senate has not released its appropriations bill. But I want to point out that the subcommittee, the appropriations subcommittee, what we're seeing is that the members of Congress are working in a bipartisan manner to help respond to the pandemic. So it is good news for us and for the coalition who cares about CDBG and home to see that there's been an increase. I anticipate that the fiscal year 21 will be approved fairly quickly so that we can use those funds across the country to respond to the public health crisis. And then I also wanted to point out what's happening in terms of eviction moratoriums. On June 29th, the House of Representatives passed the Emergency Housing Protections and Relief Act of 2020 to provide relief to renters and homeowners impacted financially by the pandemic. The moratorium evictions from federally subsidized rental units will expire at the end of the month. The bill would extend the eviction moratorium to March 27, 2021, and expand it to protect all renters. The foreclosure moratorium would be extended for 6 months following the enactment of the legislation and expanded to include all homeowners facing foreclosure. The measure would provide $100 billion for emergency rental assistance to help people struggling to pay their rent and utilities. The funds would be allocated to the ESG program. The measure creates a $75 billion state-administered homeowner assistance fund to help homeowners pay their mortgage, utilities, taxes, and other housing-related costs. And then I also want to make sure that those of you who may be impacted by this, that the state has released the COVID rental assistance program that will provide direct aid to New York tenants who have lost income due to COVID-19. The application there's a link to the application on our city website. And so if you are experiencing challenges paying your rent, we encourage you to apply for these funds through the governor's office, and that will help you cover your rent.
Thank you.
And then on the 2020-24 consolidated plan, we submitted our plan to HUD on June 19th, and they have the ESG and CDBG CV funds, our coronavirus funds. We have gone ahead and submitted the signed agreements to HUD. We are also working right now on designing our ESG program and are working with technical assistance providers provided through HUD, because they have set aside $10 million to provide technical assistance across the country. And so we are scheduled to meet this week via Zoom and start that process. So we are receiving $1.8 million in ESG funding and $1 million in CDBG funding to respond to the pandemic.
And this funding has to be used by when?
So the CDBG funds have to be used by December, and ESG, I believe, is 2 years. But we're looking to use the ESG CV funding for emergency rent and utility assistance. We are going to work on putting together metrics and outcomes and a tool to determine how we select folks who will receive these fundings, prioritizing homeless. And so we'll have that for you very soon.
Prioritizing the homeless or prioritizing
so folks who have either experienced homelessness in the past or who have experienced infection prevention, that might be some of the tools, priority scoring that we do.
I just wanted to be clear, because when you say prioritizing homeless, then people are gonna look for us to open homeless shelters and more homeless shelters.
No, we're not,
So,
again, emergency rent and utility assistance.
I just wanted to be clear.
Absolutely. And then I have reached out to our 2 emergency shelters in Mount Vernon to get a sense of what they're seeing on the ground and what some of the challenges are. They have to separate folks because of COVID-19. Right now, West Home has not had to separate anyone. They have not had anyone who's tested positive for COVID-19. So they have resumed normal operations to date. And so I'm looking to schedule a meeting with them and get a better sense of if there are any needs that they may have, so that we can make sure to factor that into our budget.
Okay, and how about our women's drop-in shelter?
I've reached out to them. I haven't heard back yet, but I'm going to follow up.
Okay, definitely want to follow up. I believe that we should be able to connect them with the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center, who should be able to do some, more frequent testing, especially for those who are in the shelters, because we know that that's an enclosed space, it's congregate care, congregate living, and there could be super spread if we do see something. So we just want to make sure that we're connecting with them often.
Absolutely. So one of the things I did was I also informed the Westchester Continuum of Care Partnership that Neighborhood Health Center has received $2 million in federal funds to do testing of COVID-19. So anyone who is listening and would like to get tested, you can go to the Neighborhood Health Center. That is available there. And those are my updates.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Next agenda.
So it's a financial update from the board treasurer.
Our Vice President Copeland.
There she is.
I know this at 10:30. This is not really handicap accessible. Just want to let you know.
Capital Project.
So it's sit on over there.
So then stood by the door, let the handicap person walk the furthest.
I
like a
think it
minister.
moved, but
Just like a minister. That's why people leave in the church.
should I get up and pull out the chain?
No.
So we are live.
So we're joined by Vice Chair Ms. Copeland, I'm changing the attendance sheet.
Yes.
Present.
You have this?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
As you have before you the financial summaries of each of the accounts before you totally underneath of the auspices of control of the URA is $1.2 million. But you should know that $410,000 is, well, let me say this, a good portion of this is restricted funding, so it means that it's for a very specific purpose. So you have $410,000 that's for the DEC engineering planning grant, which is money that is specifically for the repair of the sewers. So that's what that money is there for. In addition, you also have grant money from Cities Rise, which is $312,364.95. Then that, of course, is the project we're dealing with the housing and code enforcement issues. And then, and all of this is as of June 30th, 2020. So we have $517.35 in the list zombie grant, which that was zombie grant 1.0. Since that time, zombie 2.0 has come in. And so now there's approximately about $55,000 that's in that account because we're now on zombie 2.0. In our CDBG and home funds, there's shallow rent, which is COC, which is $31,321.70. Our home local account, trust account, is $62,314, and our home CDBG program income account is $371,070. Then you've got, of course, our general accounts, which are community development program, $44,324, and our general account, $23,721 in those accounts. Now, understand that we've moved some money around into these general accounts over the past few weeks in order to meet the needs for the existing programs because of the money that is not being transferred to the agency. Because as we've reported on several occasions, the comptroller has made it clear that she did not want to receive any more funding from HUD. And I've sent a few communications to this board as well as to the city council, outlining exactly this current situation with URA and its program funding, and the jeopardy and the consequences that are before us, which is potential that, again, those monies, which now are totaling, how much do we have out there that we're waiting? Around a little bit over 1 million, a little over 1 million.
1,047,000, I believe, is the last number.
Yeah, 1,047,000 is the amount of money that we have that we've either drawn down or we are waiting to draw down for existing programs and initiatives. And the fear of drawing
And
in
expenditures that have already been made.
Right. That's true.
We've already made $1,047,000 in expenditures for housing, domestic violence, food program, youth employment, reentry,
Rental
community
assistance.
safety, rental assistance, that has either been returned by the controller. I believe the last number was about 700 and something thousand. And then the balance of that 1,047,000 is monies that we have not drawn down because we do not want to continue to incur.
or that we've redrawn down and as far as we can see in the system, has not been returned. So, which means
But
that.
has not
but-
also been
Right,
transferred.
but that's not been given to us, which means that the money may very well be sitting in the city's bank account, right, with the comptroller, and not been returned to, for the second time, because then remember, it was right, there was several amounts of money that was returned once, or maybe even twice. We redrew them down about a month ago, some of those things specifically for the programs that we have the expenditures out, such as, right now I have to return the call to my sister's place, to Guidance Center, to MHA, Mental Health Associates, to for scholarship, we gotta give them, not returning the call, but we gotta do money for scholarship, for also, Upon This Rock, Ministries for the reentry program, community services, Family Services Westchester don't have anything, do they?
Yeah,
They do, okay, Family Services Westchester. All of these agencies are calling us about their money based upon the programs that they are administering for our constituents, and they have not gotten paid. Here's the other thing to note. Without the funding from a donor, we would not have been able to pay June. No, we would not be able to pay May. Wait. We paid all of it. We paid April, May, June, July's rents for those that
59 families?
right for 50 right for those families. And we would not have been able to pay that without that money, because that's the money that's also being held up. So that's where we are. So I'm saying that because I want to make sure we're clear that while it seems like it is a lot of money that we have in our bank account, you don't, because 3 of them are specific grants that are for specific programs that have nothing to do with HUD. The other money also is money that is in specific local accounts that now we have to try to reallocate, all right? And remembering that that there's restrictions around where we can use this money to, again, supplement for that money that we're not receiving from HUD because we can't get it.
The bottom line is we should not have to continue to create workarounds for money that we are duly owed. Monies that we have, for services that we have provided or have been provided by our subcontractors that we now owe and need to reimburse, that we have submitted the paperwork to HUD, the paperwork and the expenses have been approved, HUD has sent the money here, and the controller rejects the money. And so we are constantly trying to find workarounds to make sure that we take care of some of the most vulnerable residents in our community, because the controller, for her arbitrary reasons, returns it. So we don't want to do anything that's illegal by transferring monies that are obligated to other programs. We cannot commingle funds. And the only reason rent has been paid in the last 3.5, 4 months for 59 families is because of an outside donor that sent us money to help us through COVID. That's accurate.
That is accurate, and we have been meeting HUD requirements. We have turned around these programs. We have supporting documentation. We have written policies and procedures for our CDBG, home and COCO programs. So it is unfortunate now that we are at a place where we can withstand public scrutiny, that HUD has come in and done an audit of all of our programs, that we are at this place. And it is also incredibly concerning to me and to many others in this room and to the community, because one of the ways the federal government is responding to the needs of communities across the country is through the CDBG and home programs and COC and ESG to address needs of the most vulnerable in our communities, to make sure that people do not lose their homes and can pay their rent. And we use funds for food distribution and to address the needs of the most vulnerable in our community, and not potentially being able to access those funds
So HUD didn't say there could be, Mr. Treasurer, HUD didn't say there could be any other depository. It has to be,
Right, HUD's response back, after we reached out to them, was that it has to be a city account. It was the city's DUNS number, in order for us to receive this, money for those non-competitive funds.
Long grants.
Formula funds.
Yeah. So,
So,
wait a second.
we have been in contact with Senator Schumer's office, Senator Gillibrand's office, Congressman Engel's office. Their offices have been contacting and speaking with HUD representatives and officials also to try and identify some type of workarounds. HUD is astonished, the federal representatives are astonished, and our county government is pretty astonished by what is happening and what the controller is doing. They all say it's pretty unprecedented. So,
So, I mean, so that's the financial, status of the agency, other financial information.
well, I have another
Okay.
question. With regards to this code enforcement officer, there is currently a code enforcement officer paid out of this list grant,
There's funding for code enforcement.
but there's not a hired person.
It's not a hired person yet, because that's getting ready to come, two things. One, we needed to get the job description finalized with, civil service, because they said there's no code enforcement officer, job description. There's a housing, this and that, so.
There's a housing inspector position description, there's a building
So
inspector. there's a
in 1998, there was a code enforcement officer, second deputy of planning.
Right, right, but remember, those positions were also changed a little under either Ernie or Richard, I don't know which one. But that's still the position as it pertains to the deputies, you're right. That is the position in which Marlon is in.
Yeah, but that wasn't what that job was supposed to be. The second deputy was supposed to be, and then a person who went out and looked at these things and gave tickets. That's why it wasn't created in the first place. I was still here then, I think, 98, yeah. Back when I was naive. Could have been, but for the
So,
record.
since I've been in the position, we focus more on trying to increase the capacity, so,
No, I know what you're doing. It ain't about you. It's not related to you specifically. It's related to why there's not a code enforcement officer
because
now.
it's not an approved position, and so
So-
we've gone through the process with civil service to create the position so that we could properly hire. And not just for this position, but for the same positions that are funded through the 2020 budget in the city to be hired in the building department.
But we need a census coordinator. We don't have that position either.
Correct. But again, that's a
But we
part-time.
have money.
Right, but that's a
Still
part-time.
requires a job description. Just because it's part-time doesn't mean it doesn't have a job description.
You're right, you're correct. And we can all, you are correct.
No meds, and I still got it right.
Right, you are correct, which is all of those things that are being submitted to civil service this week.
Yeah, but the census. All right, let's move on.
I hear you. All right, so the other aspect of finance is the 2016 audit. So the mayor and I had a meeting, I guess you would call it an exit meeting with the auditors to review and to finalize their draft. So that meeting went well. They are now finalizing the audit itself. We went over the management letter and everything with them. So once we receive that, which I anticipate should be within the next week, we will then probably call a special meeting of this board, so you we'll present it to you, and then call a special meeting of this board for the adoption of that 2016 URA audit.
That's great, but I'm more interested in the 16, 17, 18, and 19 of the IDA board audits. When are those come?
Well, the
16, 17, and
18
18
are
are
done.
done.
Oh, I'd like to see those.
Yeah.
16, 17, and 18 are done.
Done.
And we are in conversation.
We just contracted for
Contracted for
the
2019.
I'm interested in 16, 17, and 18 of the IDA.
Okay. 2019 is going to be very interesting and important too.
Not just for us, for the
Mhm.
authorities.
Oh, absolutely. The whole year, not just the
I know.
first half.
Oh, I know. I'm clear. I've been clear.
All right. So it's very important though, the 2016 audit is done because that's, you know, that is
Another
what
mess.
the controller stands on for why she won't accept funds. We know that urban renewal is audit ready for 2017 and 18, correct?
Yes.
Well, one of the challenges is that we have been talking to Grassi and company, right? With the people who were hired by, the city, right? Because the council approved for them to close those books, to close 16, 17, and 18. But they have not been paid for the work that they did for 16. So they have been somewhat slow walking the information for 17, and we finally made contact with them the other day, Monday, to try to work with them to get the information for 17 so that the auditors can begin 17. But it should be noted that there's an outstanding bill for Grassi and Company that needs to be paid.
How much is that bill?
Approximately 28,000.
So, I mean, bottom line, you know, you cannot point a finger and say that you can't complete city audits and that the bond rating for the city has been eliminated because audits haven't been done for URA, and then not pay money to the auditing firms that have completed the work to get us back on track. You cannot set a fire and then refuse to put out the fire at the same time. And honestly, that's just what's happening. So until we're able to pay for 2016, as we've already stated, we're not going to be able to move forward on 2017 and 2018. And all of that rests in the controller's office and her cutting the checks for paying.
And the Grassi, they audited the water department too, right?
Yes.
But the water department pays their own.
No, because I'm interested in seeing those from 17 and 18 as well. If they're complete.
Yeah, so all of those audits for those years are all now coming to completion. I think that the water department 17 was just done.
Correct.
Right. So they may be beginning 18.
Yes.
But I think that 17 was just done, so we're clear, right? 17, so up to 17 is done for the water department. Up to 18 is done for IDA. 16 is done for URA. And in the next week or so, all of those will have been, I guess, finalized and approved by those various boards for whatever distribution. That's the goal, right? I think that it's important for not only this board, but also for the public to know what what the differences are. Because I don't think sometimes the board, the public, right? So,
It's not just the public, it's the finance officer
Well,
who doesn't understand.
okay, I hear you. You're right. So for water and IDA, they are purely independent agencies, right? That do their audits, they get the audits done, so on and so on, right? For URA is the agency for the city that has been administering its HUD funding.
Since
That-
1979.
Since 1979.
When it
That
was created.
funding is restricted. It is program specific, right? It has a very low threshold of administrative cost. So therefore, the city has to shoulder some of the financial responsibility for the administration of that, such as making sure that audits are complete, also some other administrative costs and things of that sort. In the past, as you know, Council President Copeland, that has, the relationship and the structure has not always been correct. And so what has happened over the years is that we've incurred a whole lot of cost, right? That has been placed upon the agency, but in accordance to federal law, belongs to the city.
Yes.
Because the city is the recipient. At the end of the day, the roosters are gonna come home. The heads are gonna come home to roost. And at some point in time, the city, no matter what, is gonna have to pay the cost. And we need to understand that. We keep kicking the can down the road. And to your point, the finance department seems not to understand that we've gotta come to resolution on this, on all of these matters, right, in order to get it done. So somebody asked a question about the Paris report for the URA. Well, yeah, I would file the Paris report, but I can't file the Paris report without there being annual financials, right, to that. So it's not as if I, as the treasurer, am holding up the Paris report. I can't do the Paris report without there being a clear understanding of having an audit, having financials done, having an audit completed, understanding a clear investment report, all of that. So I just want to make sure, because I got to go on record to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing, right? But it cannot be done until these things are kind of flushed out.
And the URA cannot be divorced from the city of Mount Vernon, and that is what the controller continues to try and do, is divorce the URA from the city. If it could be so, if it were so, or it could be easily done, then we would be able to have the URA receive the money for our community. But because the city of Mount Vernon is the recipient of formula funds based on our demographics, the monies have to come through the city as a pass-through for the URA to provide the programs. I know you already know that, but since we're filming and this is a public meeting, we want to make sure that the public understands it. And so we receive, outside of COVID funds, over $3 million a year from HUD. And usually when you're receiving money from any federal, state agency or foundation, there is what you call a local match. And that's simply what the administrative costs around audits and staff benefits really are. It's nothing more than a local match. And usually if you do not provide the local match, you will eventually lose and/or have to pay back the federal, state, or private funds. And so, this is where we're constantly coming into conflict, is with the city funding the local match to the federal monies that we're given. And they provide critical services to, as we've already stated, our most vulnerable residents here in Mount Vernon. So something has to give. Any more questions?
No.
So I'm pleased to announce that we are being awarded $80,000 by the city's for Financial Empowerment Fund for a financial navigator grant. And so we are partnering with the Urban League of Westchester, and they will hire two part-time individuals through the Urban League to be financial navigators. So they will provide resources and referrals and information to residents of the city who may need assistance around unemployment, school aid, small business grants, basic general information around financial empowerment to help the residents of the city. We're one of a small cohort of cities that, jurisdictions around the country that are receiving this grant. I don't have the list yet of who else is receiving it, but I think we're the only ones in New York who have been awarded this grant. So it's part of helping develop the financial empowerment program here in the city. And then down the road, we would look at getting through this funder a financial counseling grant so that we can provide counseling to residents of the city and financial literacy. But we're starting with this, which is more of a light touch. Really excited about partnering with the Urban League, who has a history history of working with communities of color to address economic development needs. And the Urban League of Westchester has a background in addressing financial literacy and has done work with the CFPB and some of their financial toolkits. So we're going to have our first meeting this Friday, some more to come. And we'll put together as one of the products a manual of resources to help identify resources and information for residents of the city.
And thank you so much for going after these grants. Sometimes people say, why would you waste time going after an $80,000 grant? And what people don't often understand is, like you said, these are initial soft grants that help to build our community's capacity so that we can be eligible to go after larger grants or larger programs and become a part of a learning cohort. So this is the entry level. It will give us skills and it will allow us to develop programs that we have not had, because oftentimes when you want to go after other monies, they want to ask, what have you done? Show us your track record. So we'll be able to demonstrate a track record. In the past, I went after $10,000 grants that then yielded $650,000 grants that we would have never been even eligible to apply for if we hadn't participated in the $10,000 grants. And for people who are like, well, what is a financial navigator? People used to call them case managers, but navigators are out there helping the people move, identify, find, locate, secure, and walk through some of these services. So thank you.
Well, and it's also part of a bigger picture, because we're doing baby steps, because we want to have a financial literacy program here in the city, have financial counseling for residents in the city. So we are, starting to develop these programs and excited to partner with an organization that's affiliated with Bloomberg Philanthropies. And it's another reason that they considered us is because we are now a Bloomberg city. And so that was part of it as well.
It's not the strategy, it's part of a comprehensive strategy.
Correct.
And I think that it's important for the public to recognize
Can you
that.
speak louder?
I'm sorry.
Because that's
I
all
think
over there.
I think that it's important also for the public to recognize, or at least be informed, that beyond what always seems to be the headliners, right? And the headliners seem to be about URA and its 2016 audit and URA and HUD. Well, URA is doing a whole lot more than just administering HUD funding, right? URA is also assisting the city and supporting the city's initiatives in other areas, such as getting grants. So for example, just this morning, we talk about funding that comes through various grants under URA that deal with things such as financial empowerment, that deal with housing and code enforcement, that is dealing with addressing issues of blight, right? And the issues of homelessness and hunger, right? All of these things are coming out of the agency of URA, right? It's coming based upon the resources of the people that are in planning in URA, that are writing, and in cooperation with the commissioners of various departments to write grants, to get money in, to support the initiatives of a community that is already under-resourced, right? To have to deal with a day-to-day minutia and obstacle and challenge of allowing money to come into a community that is already under-resourced makes absolutely no sense, right? And to continuously be criticized for the work that you are doing on a day-to-day basis. These folks are working hard every day. I'm up there with them every day. They're working all the way into the wee hours of the morning and nights to try to make sure that there is funding, there's resources, there's programs that are coming to this city for the residents of this city. And again, none of that is being highlighted because it's being overshadowed by the fact that there are these major challenges around previous audits, previous structures, previous problems, right? Nobody's recognizing the fact that, we've corrected so many issues. Nobody acknowledges the fact that the program audits are coming back clean, right? Nobody's recognizing that, there's been internal policies and procedures that are made. Nobody's recognizing the fact that there's a consolidated plan that has been done. No one is recognizing you know, these kinds of things. But I think that we need to, at some point, we gotta stop and say, you know what, it ain't all bad. There's a
Right.
whole lot of good that's
Let's
happening
go.
here. While, you know what, we're basically climbing ourselves out of a hole. We are now above surface. We can see the sunlight, right? And I think that it just needs to be noted. You know, I don't often kind of go off like that, but at some point in time,
No.
you need to stop and say, understand, there's a lot going on. There's some good stuff that's happening. Ask the questions. I wish, you know, Channel 12 News and Bantla and all of them would ask those questions rather than continuously doing investigative stories to trying to find the dirt. Well, what about the positive stuff that is happening? What about the 59 families that are being affected by the stuff that we are doing to give them a place for them to live? What about the young men that are in the reentry program that are actually getting a second chance because there's funding that is coming through HUD and that we're battling every day to make sure that we keep it? What about those things?
But while some of our formal media may not recognize that, you know, whether that's institutional or structural racism or ignorance, you know, because as we noted this morning, Mount Vernon is the only community that has its own tab on LoHUD. You have Westchester, you have Putnam, you have Rockland, then you have Mount Vernon. And then we went to that tab of the last 20 some odd stories that were written, 19 or 18 of them were about negative things. But what is interesting is last night when I was on Facebook, there was a report on a Black Children's Matter rally. And the people's comments were saying, well, Mount Vernon is always doing something negative. They need to teach their community about financial literacy. They need to teach their community about this. And because of what we put on our Facebook page, on CMVNY or Mayor Sean Patterson Howard, there were people who went and took snapshots of the work that we're doing around financial literacy, the work that was done around Juneteenth and the whole week of financial education, the work that is being done around employment training, the work that is being done to give information to the small businesses. So it was really, really interesting. So while we might be frustrated that the standard media does not recognize the efforts and the extra work that is being done, that the community is finding this information to be helpful, and they're proud to see their community do it.
I don't consider the Journal News a newspaper. I consider it a rag. Jonathan Bandler is an investigative reporter. They let go of the other staff that did these kind of stories. So what else would we expect?
Right. And we will have
And there's some other
conversations.
things I'd like to say about, but we're live, right?
Yes.
About Mr. Bandler.
We'll wait.
I'll resist.
No, but that's very important. You know, we had a conversation, around the fact that media can either plant and water, or that they can take away the sun and kill. And what we've traditionally seen LoHUD do is take the sun off of Mount Vernon and try and kill us, as opposed to share anything that's positive. And we've had that conversation also, is when the only person assigned to your community is not a journalist, is not a reporter, but an investigative reporter, then the only thing that that person is trained to do is to see negative and to put a negative spin on anything that is happening. So we wouldn't expect anything else to come out of LoHUD other than negative. And unfortunately, we have to adopt them every year.
We
as our
don't. There's
newspaper.
other daily newspapers.
There's other daily news. So
The hell with
we
it.
might have to look at something different, because LoHUD does nothing to try and promote what is happening positively in this community. And we might have to really
And the
look
people
at
don't,
some
when they do the buys,
opportunities.
nobody buys it.
Mhm.
They want to read about the shenanigans. So as long as that sells, they're going to keep printing it. And Jonathan Bandler is the king of putting 3/4 of, well, anyway.
Negative.
That's why your person is important.
Right. We're excited about our home communications team. We're expanding our bandwidth and our capacity.
Right.
You want to move to item
Yes.
five? Actually, item 6. So the Liz Zombie program, we just submitted our annual report, and actually, it's interesting that you described the process of going after a smaller grant that yields, access to more resources, and that's exactly what the zombie grant was. It was a grant that we got in 2016, and then.
When I was planning commission.
Yes, and then we implemented it in 2017. And the grant helped the city build its internal capacity to deal with vacant properties. 1 to 4 family homes that are back home was the initial focus. And the grant paid for a zombie coordinator that helped us create a database called Building Blocks. I think we spoke about it in the past. And then the other half went to hiring a code enforcement officer. So we did have code enforcement in 2018 and most of 2019, but it was focused on 1 to 4 vacant homes owned by banks that allow us to cite banks that were not maintaining their properties up to code. At the same time, we identified an additional 135 non-bank owned properties. So at this point, we are getting ready to launch Zombie 2.0, and this time we learned from Zombie 2.1. So the Zombie coordinator that was hired back in March is currently getting code enforcement credentials. So because of COVID, the class got disrupted, but he just finished, as a matter of fact, today the second test for the second course, and he's going to finish with the third course in August. And at that point, we'll have an additional code enforcement officer within the planning department that is focused on 1 to 4 family homes. The other part of the Zombie 2.0 is that we want to make sure that we leverage the zombie law, and to that effect, the grant is allowing us to partner with Pace University so that the law students can support the housing work that the legal department is going to do as part of Cities Rise. And so when we started with the Zombie 1.0, now that enabled us to attract Cities Rise funding to the effect of $612,000. And now we have a coordinated effort to improve our code enforcement, both from the Zombie grant, which is supported by LISC, and the Cities Rise, which is supported by Enterprise. And what's important to note is that because of the relationship that we developed, we were able to respond to COVID as it relates to homeowners being affected. And as a matter of fact, we have a webinar scheduled for tomorrow evening being delivered by WRO, and this is to talk about the forbearance process, what happens after it finishes, and what can homeowners do to avoid foreclosure. And so that's happening tomorrow at 6:30, and if folks are listening, they can register at WROinc.org, or they can go to the city's Facebook page, and we have a flyer with the link posted on it. As a matter of fact, we created an event on our Facebook page to promote the webinar happening tomorrow.
We'll do a brief live just to announce several things today. Post the flyers work, but people pay attention to quick live commercials also, so we'll push it.
All right. You want to move on to the next one? Okay. So, Cities Rise. I think the previous 2 meetings, the first meeting, as you said, back in March, we in April, we accepted the Secret Fix, which is the technological platform to engage our residents so that they can submit housing complaints to the city of Mount Vernon. Last month, we approved a contract with Mount Vernon United Tenants, which is the on-the-ground grassroots support for the tenant organizing that is going to take place to engage those folks who are not on social media or who are not comfortable using online apps. And so the third strategy behind the Cities Rise program is taking a look internally at City Hall, how we function, how our city managers sort of delegate responsibilities to the staff. So to that effect, Cities Rise, and this is one of the handouts for today, is in the our program, the Urban Renewal Agency, is in the process of setting up a service contract with the Management Center. The Management Center proposes to train senior managers as well as staff on managing responsibilities as it relates to creating equity. What that means is we want to make sure that Mount Vernon residents feel that confidence in our government, that if they submit a complaint, that they're going to get a fair assessment of their complaint, and that the city will allocate a code enforcement officer to follow up on that complaint. When we did the civic engagement program back in last summer and into the fall, we learned that confidence was low in city government, and this is part of restoring that trust with our constituents, and it starts with our senior managers sort of buying into the idea that we need to provide a process that's transparent and access to our city services. And the Management Center specializes in this, and this is an approved budget item in our Cities Rise program. So we met with Commissioner Francis from the HR department, so she is going to work with our planning staff to implement this training. We're hoping to conduct it at the end of August. As you know, September, these things tend to pick up really quickly, so we want to make sure that if there is a little bit of any time available in those last 2 weeks, that we act on it so that we can get this training enacted.
So can we make sure that this is not just for planning staff? Can we also include our VCO staff from PD? Can we also pull in our code enforcement? I believe we have 9 or 10 code enforcement officers who are in the FD, the fire department, because they're going to be activated to do some different things. You know, our building department people, our DPW, definitely DPW, as well as our consumer protection staff. So we just, anyone who's going to be going out and kind of dealing with code enforcement, VCOs, quality of life issues, we want to make sure that they're all trained. And that we all have the same training, that we all have the same understanding of what equity should look like, so that our residents who live on Franklin Avenue will have the same confidence that will respond to a call that, happens in Fleetwood, because that's what you always see. Don't forget about the South Side. Don't forget, anything that's done. Paving was done on Elwood. Don't forget about the South Side. So that.
Yeah, no, we're absolutely going to include all of those comments into the training. So that concludes the update on zombie property in Cities Rise.
Resolutions?
So do we do all business? I gave away the resolution.
You gotta vote on
Have a
the
resolution?
Yes, so, can I run? So, we have a resolution 2020-015, resolution of the Mount Vernon Urban Renewal Agency authorizing the agency to execute the consultant agreement with the Management Center to conduct senior management and staff equity training supporting equitable access to code enforcement as part of the Cities Rise program. So, you said it was a motion.
Someone has made a motion?
Can you explain it? Because we just.
That's what he kind of just spoke about, that we are looking to contract with the Management Center to do training. This is 1-2 pages.
Yeah.
Document. That's
I mean, I know you just gave it to us.
Actually, it was emailed. And had I looked at it, I guess I would have known the meeting was
Well, I
at 10
don't
instead
know.
of 10:30.
I went to my emails at 9, up until 9:30 last
Don't
night.
do that. I'm not going to
Thank
school.
you. Okay, I make a motion that we adopt resolution 2020-015.
second.
On the question? Hearing none, if you can call for the vote?
Chair Patterson Howard,
Yes?
Vice Chair Lisa Copeland,
Aye.
Treasurer Darren Morton,
Aye.
Member Brian Johnson,
Aye.
Member Brian Johnson. All right.
So it passes. Next item agenda?
Old business?
The health, those people still have their health care benefits?
As of now, yes. What New York State has been asking is, for us to, start to at least pay for the people who are currently on the plan, which includes, at this point, includes all retirees. We have no staff at this point, that are on it. But the problem is that with the staff, with the retirees, of course, excluding now Melinda, right? The last employee, excluding her. All the others, are people who are on the question as to whether or not the work that they were,
Not all, but most.
not all, right? Well, yeah, who? I don't think I don't know if Jerry is Jerry post on it? She might be. She might be, yeah, so, but the problem is that you don't have the documentation of the work that they did related to the HUD stuff. So that's the reason why you got the challenge of who needs to pay. But that's where we are. Where we are is that, yes, but sooner or later, they're gonna cut it off and those retirees are not going to have medical.
And they're gonna sue and they're gonna win.
Well, to be clear, the city council did approve, 234,000 or somewhere around that amount, to be, paid using city funds, to be paid to the state.
I think it was in 2018, wasn't it?
And yes. So that was done, and so now that bill is over $300,000.
Yeah. That's my proverbial kicking your can down the road.
Okay, till it becomes a bear.
Yeah.
Next item? Any new business?
No, sir.
I'm making a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Roll call?
Roll call.
Okay. Motion to adjourn, Chair Tyson Howard,
Yes?
Vice Chair Copeland,
Aye.
Treasurer Darren Morton,
Yes.
Member Brian Johnson,